Star Wars 7x7, episode 2622. So Life Day is still a couple of months away, but it's never a bad time to celebrate the holidays, right? So today we've got the Life Day Treasury review here for you. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So the Life Day Treasury has just been released today. It is the book by George Mann and Cavan Scott with illustrations by Grant Griffin, and it follows on the heels of two previous books, and they were both authored by George Mann, so Cavan Scott coming into this is the new wrinkle, as it were. And I say that because it is presented as along a similar vein to Myths and Fables and Dark Legends, the two previous books by George Mann that came out. Like, that's sort of the design of the book, the presentation of the book. The actual stories, though, aren't necessarily presented in the same way. I'll say that two of them maybe are presented in sort of that fairy tale kind of format in the way that they're introduced, but the rest of them actually feel rather contemporary in their presentation. And instead of being introduced as this is an old tale from this particular time, a lot of the stories in here are presented with characters interacting in a particular situation, but then talking about, oh, there was this old fairy tale that affects their particular lives. For example, one of the stories, which is called The Kindling, takes place in the Galactic Civil War time period. You have two people who are escaping from an Imperial labor camp, and one of them is a Twi'lek and tells the other one a story in the midst of the action that's happening of something that happened long ago on Aeloth, which is a moon of the whole Ryloth system that was actually talked about in Tempest Runner, the Cavan Scott audio drama that was just released last week, funnily enough. And the story this Twi'lek tells is from the days of the Sith Empire and about how people rebelled against the Sith on Aeloth way back in the day. So yeah, it's kind of, that sort of thing that happens in many of the stories where contemporary characters are talking about legends in their world. And I thought that was a neat and refreshing way to go about things, and it's certainly sensible based on the introduction, the way that they frame the fact that Life Day was a celebration that started on Kashyyyk and was in their whole culture for thousands of years and eventually spread out to the larger galaxy. But they also talk about how, oh yeah, midwinter celebrations are kind of a common thing in other cultures, and so we're not necessarily just exploring Life Day, but we are going to explore some of these other midwinter types of celebrations. But there is at least one connection to those previous books. There's a story called An Old Hope, which is a fun play on A New Hope, and it has to do with someone on Tatooine that the droids refer to as the Oil Bringer. And, there was a story in Myths and Fables that suggested the presence of Obi-Wan Kenobi interacting with Tusken Raiders, and it feels like this is another Obi-Wan Kenobi story too. And that in itself makes me hope that, there's going to be great drama and some interesting stuff in the Kenobi series, but I hope they do some, fun little thing to show his effect on the people of Tatooine and, how he might be interacting with them in some unexpected ways and creating legends in some fashion. And there's also a High Republic story in here. So the first story that kicks things off as a Coruscant solstice, and it involves Stellan Gios, who is newly elected to the Jedi High Council. And for as touching as that story is, it also kind of reveals, I feel like, a little bit of the presaging of the downfall of the High Republic in a way. Like, it shows even at that time, a couple hundred years before the events of the Phantom Menace, that there's still kind of a rotten core at the heart of Coruscant, right? The fact that they've got all this wonderful stuff on the top levels, but when you continue to go further down in the levels of Coruscant, things are as bad as they ever were during the times of the prequel trilogy. And stories in here are moving as well, and sometimes for different reasons. Probably the toughest one for me to read was the Song of Winter's Heart, which is the Alderaan story. And there are surprises in that story, and ultimately it's hard not to view that story through the lens of what life is like here in America in 2021. And much more innocently is The Tree of Life, which is the Wookiee story that closes out the collection. And for all the focus on Ben Solo and him growing up and whether he had particular issues with his parents not being as available as they could, should, would have been under other circumstances, we have kind of a similar situation with Lumpa Waru, who used to be Lumpy, now wants to be called Waru, and you can see the same kind of situation developing with him because of Chewbacca's absence. Now, maybe that's just personal for me. I did not have a father growing up, and so I don't necessarily understand the outsized influence that fathers have, and I'm almost surprised at it sometimes when I realize the influence that I have on my own sons. So reading stories about things like that, yeah, that definitely is touching in a particular way to me. So all in all, a good mix of stories, some with familiar characters and situations, some that are completely brand new to keep things fresh, and some that'll actually crack your heart open, which, never a bad thing in this world. And that's going to do it for this episode of the show today. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.